Hello, book lovers, and welcome to Book Talk Radio Club. My name is Claire Perkins, and today I'm talking to the winner of Book Talk Radio Club's Book of the Year 2020, Keith Hirshland. Keith is an Emmy Award-winning sports television producer and author of 3 other books: Cover Me Boys, I'm Going In, Tales of the Tube from a Broadcast Brat, a memoir about his experiences in the television industry, Big Fly, a witty mystery, and The Flower Girl, a crime mystery. But today we're going to talk about Book of the Year, Murphy Murphy and the Case of Serious Crisis, a crime novel that combines humour, mystery and grammar goofs as Murphy Murphy, a detective, pursues clues and suspects from coast to coast. Hi Keith, first of all, I would like to congratulate you for winning Book Talk Radio Club's Book of the Year 2020 for Murphy Murphy and the Case of Serious Crisis.
Well, thank you very much, Claire, and it's a pleasure to be with you. And I have to tell you that I still get, every time you say winner of the Book Talk Radio Club's Book of the Year, I get goosebumps. I just want to thank Book Talk Radio Club and you for that amazing honor. And, it was a thrill when I heard that Murphy Murphy was named Book of the Year for 2020. Also a surprise because there were so many great authors and great works that, from which you had to choose. So I appreciate all those other authors, and I certainly appreciate you and everything you do to help those of us who are trying to write books in these crazy times.
Oh, it's my pleasure and well deserved. Would you like to tell Book Talk Radio Club's listeners about the book?
Sure. As you mentioned, it was the 4th one that I had written, and without a doubt, I had the most fun writing it of any of my previous works. I tried to take a little bit of a different twist and have a mystery and have a story that kind of didn't take itself all that seriously. And I think I succeeded, but the book was kind of it started out as a seed of, could I make a book that included as many redundant phrases as I could possibly think of?
I think you did it.
Yeah, I think I did, and there was a challenge, and I wasn't sure at various points along the way whether or not I could be successful, but I knock on wood, thank my lucky stars that it turned out the way it did, and I'm really proud of it, and so far it seems like people are liking it.
Yep, most definitely. Murphy Murphy comes from a long line of male Murphys. All were named Murphy and all were cops. It made me laugh. Why on earth Murphy Murphy? Is there a family tradition behind it?
There's not. And it had to be a mystery because for whatever reason that's where I'm at in my writing career. And if there was a mystery, there had to be both a crime and a crime solver. And if the heart of the book was redundancies, the detective or the person that was going to be the crime solver had to have a redundant name. And I went through my head, and if it was a woman, could it be Grace or Kelly Kelly? If it was a man, might it be Gordon or Abraham, because all of those people with 2 first names kind of things. And
Sure.
for some reason, I just hit on Murphy, and it sounded right.
Yeah.
And it sounded kind of like something that people could really, really remember. So that's how Murphy became the protagonist.
What kind of character is he? I know he has an aversion to redundant phrases, and his captain takes great pleasure in irritating him by using them on purpose.
Yeah, my good friend Murphy. I'd like to think he is kind of a normal guy who also is a stickler and has certain things that get a bee in his bonnet and that he can't let go of, and one of them is these redundant phrases. And he has grown up, obviously, because his name is Murphy, around people kind of using redundant phrases or making fun of him, and it just, as he grew up, it kind of, it stuck in his craw, and wrongs of everybody that uses a redundant phrase. Um, but in the end, I mean, I like to think again that, he's just kind of, he's kind of a normal guy that finds himself trying to set out to make the world a better place.
This Murphy heads the Department of Redundancy Department. What is the Department of Redundancy Department? I'm laughing so much, I hope people understand me.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? That's great. He had to be a cop, so he had to work in the police department, but because his particular pet peeve was redundancies, I decided that the folks in the police department, especially his captain, would carve out a special unit for him, and that unit would be the Department of Redundancy Department. So he has his own his own bailiwick, and throughout the early part of his policing career, which may end up in another book some other time, he really didn't have that much to do. But all of a sudden, this band, Serious Crisis, came along, and they started needing his services. So all of a sudden, the Department of Redundancy Department had to spring into action.
I love the story behind Captain David Dud Hill's name. Why the Dud bit?
That goes back to, I guess when I was a kid, I had my best friend in grammar school and growing up was a young guy named Dave Hill, and my brother, I have an older brother, and his name is David, and so for whatever reason, the nickname that we called both of them was Dud. We called our Davids Dud for some reason. So I wanted, my friend Dave Hill was kind enough to allow me to use his name as for the character, and I wanted to have his nickname be Dud, and so he had to have a backstory behind that nickname. And in the book, I kind of described how he got that nickname, what the backstory was, and him getting the nickname Dud. But it just came from, when I was a kid, calling my brother Dud and calling my good friend Dave Hill Dud.
That's funny.
Not that they're duds. They're not. They're both duds.
So Serious Crisis, the band, find their belongings going missing, and Murphy has to investigate, and then the stakes in the case of Serious Crisis becomes a lot more dire. What happens?
Well, along with, as you said, possessions and belongings going missing, without giving too much away in the story, an actual band member also goes missing. She is there for a concert that they give one night, and the next morning the band wakes up and this particular character is nowhere to be found. So it goes from being a case of Murphy trying to help the band rediscover certain expensive belongings and possessions to a lot more, as you say, dire straits, in that all of a sudden now a person has gone missing.
I thoroughly enjoyed Murphy and your other books too, but this one had me frequently laughing out loud. It's such clever writing and storytelling, Keith. What made you go down the route of writing a humorous crime story?
Boy, well, that's a great question, Claire. I'd written two other mysteries, Big Flies and The Flower Girl Murder, as you mentioned, and I think, as I said a little bit earlier, I think I just wanted to see if I could not take the next book or myself quite so seriously. So, I had this idea, that this redundant phrases idea, and that was really the kind of the seed that started Murphy, because I thought, it was a challenge to myself. Can I really write a book that centers itself around redundant phrases and redundancies, and how do I do that, and where can I, from where can I draw the creative inspiration to do that? And once you go down the road of exploring
Mm.
you have to have the book have a little bit of a funny bone.
Sure.
So I think that, I made sure that even the things that seem dire, like the missing person case or the missing person aspect, I kind of wanted to, I set myself the challenge to say, as I describe this and as I go through the progression of writing this story, that I need to even make those kinds of things and those kinds of situations a little bit on the humorous side, because that's the tone of the book.
So I've got to ask, why redundant phrases then? Is this something that you've always been interested in or that's tickled your funny bone?
It's one of those things where it has to, I think it comes from, and I'll backtrack a little bit and say that every one of my books, including the one I just finished and sent off to the publisher today, which is a sequel to The Flower Girl Murder, has some truth or some aspect of something that actually happened to me in it. And
Right.
when I was a television producer, my job was to work with announcers. We did live sports broadcasts, and the announcers with whom I worked, it was my job, to tell them the situation, tell them where we were going, tell them what we were doing. And one of the things that always drove me crazy was when an announcer on my crew would use a redundancy in their commentary. And so we'd have meetings before and afterwards and chide each other, and I would, even to the point of setting up a jar in the production truck for whenever one of my announcers used a redundancy or a cliche, it would cost them $1, and they'd have to put $1 in the jar, and we'd use that money at the end of the year to help fuel a party. But I think that was where I think that the idea of using redundant phrases in a story came about, that because it was a particular pet peeve of mine when I used to work with the folks in the television business.
Ah, right. So there's quite a bit of Keith Hirshland in Murphy then.
Maybe.
Murphy in the Case of Serious Crisis, a one-off, or will we be reading more of Murphy in his different cases? I know you said probably in the future, but give us an idea.
We have definitely not seen the last of our intrepid detective.
Good.
He, as I said, I just finished my latest effort called Song Girl, which you'll like this, I hope. It's as I said, it's the sequel to The Flower Girl Murder, so Detective Mark Allen is involved, but he has moved away from Raleigh, North Carolina. He has relocated, makes friends. One of his friends happens to suffer a bit of a freak accident, and when she's briefly in a coma, and when she wakes up, she can only speak in song titles. So that was another one of those things, like the redundant phrases. I thought, can I write a book where one of the main characters can only speak in song titles? So that was the challenge for that one. Anyway, but for the new Murphy, which is going to be the one I start next, he is now working. He will now be working with the Commission on Cliches. So instead of redundant phrases, the next Murphy mystery will feature as many cliches as I can put in 300 pages.
Very clever. So out of the 4 books you've written and published, 3 of them are crime or crime thrillers. You obviously enjoy writing them. Are there any particular authors in this genre that have inspired you?
Probably, sure. And I think I write that genre because it's what I most read. I like historical fiction too. I like, some and some history as well. But I'm not a big science fiction fan. I tend to kind of gravitate more toward mysteries and crime thrillers. So I would say that I read everything that Michael Connelly writes. I think Kerry Bosch he's an LA detective that is a great character. So he's one of my favorites. But at the same time, I also like writers that use a little bit of whimsy in their work. Jasper Ford, I would say, are role models in that they write great books, and at the same time, they don't take themselves all that seriously. So, those are the kind of books you read, and you, I'm so thrilled to hear you say you laughed out loud when you read Murphy Murphy, because when I read those guys, there's no shortage of chuckles and laughing out loud. So I guess, those three would be among my, kind of role models.
Let's touch briefly on your other books, Keith. Firstly, your memoir, Cover Me Boys, I'm Going In, Tales of the Tube from a Broadcast Brat. Tell me a little bit about that.
That was, a memoir, like you say, about, I spent 40 years and almost 40 years in the television business, broadcast television, mostly in televising live sporting events. And, I had I loved my career in TV, and I was, supremely lucky in what I did for a living, and had no idea, intention, thought of ever writing a book. And then my parents passed away my dad passed away in 2007, my mom a little less than a year later, and we were kind of cleaning out their condo and came across, a number of boxes filled with newspaper clippings, memorabilia, awards that my dad had won. They were in television. They started a TV station in Reno, Nevada, and so we found all these commendations and awards and newspaper stories, and my wife looked at me while we were going through this and said, don't let this be your kids. Don't have, your three kids when you're gone standing over a box and pulling out your Emmy or pulling out, your pictures of you and some of the famous athletes with whom you've worked and some of the famous announcers with whom you've worked, and say, my gosh, I had no idea that Dad did this. And so she said, start putting your stories down in a journal to leave for them, so that they have something, that kind of they can look back on and say and see, kind of what an interesting life you read. Absolutely. So I started doing that, and about a third of the way through that, I thought, well, heck, these stories aren't bad. Maybe this could be a book. And that's how Cover Me Boys, I'm Going In, Tales of the Tube from a Broadcast Brat came about. It started out as something to leave to my kids, and it turned into a memoir.
And then Big Flies. This is a crime novel loosely based on unsolved crimes, isn't it?
It is, and that, again, as I said, all of my books have a piece of me in them, or that's what the seed that started out the story. And this one, I was in Reno, Nevada in 1971 when D.B. Cooper became the first skyjacker in U.S. aviation history. He demanded $200,000, hijacked the plane in Seattle, Washington, demanded that he be, that the plane take him to Mexico. They couldn't make it the whole way, so they told him and told, the authorities that they were going to land in Reno and refuel. So my dad, as I said, owned a TV station and started a TV station in Reno. His team, his news team, when they heard this news, jumped at it, got all the equipment, ran out to the airport. We were watching, and the plane landed, and D.B. Cooper wasn't on the plane. He had parachuted out of the plane somewhere over the Pacific Northwest of the United States, and they have never. That was 40 years ago. Never found him. Only found a little bit of the money, so nobody knows what happened to D.B. Cooper. So I thought, well, I can write a story about that, and it was basically a son who grows up, his father dies, and through the process of cleaning out his father's house, he comes to the realization that his father was D.B. Cooper. And while I was researching the book, I also found that during that time, about a 10-year period of time around the D.B. Cooper skyjacking, there were 3 other real-life, still unsolved robberies and have the person, the father, not only be D.B. Cooper, but be the mastermind behind these other three still unsolved robberies. So that's Big Flies.
And lastly, the Flower Girl murder. Can you give Book Talk Radio Club's listeners a brief description of the story without giving too much away, of course?
Sure. And again, Sarah and I had moved to North Carolina. She was being transferred from her company in North Carolina to Los Angeles. It was in the middle of the downturn in the economy, so it was a bad time to sell our house. So we decided to rent it. We rented it to somebody, a girl who was in law school, and then we moved to Los Angeles. Well, the girl stayed in the house. The father wanted to buy the house. Her father wanted to buy the house for her. We obviously agreed to that. He said he wanted to pay cash. We agreed to that as well, but he couldn't come up with all the cash at once. So he needed to give us a little bit at a time. We agreed to that for a short period of time until we decided, listen, this is crazy. Why don't you get a loan? He said he couldn't get a loan. He had to pay us in cash. We extricated ourselves from the deal. So I imagined that this character was an old farmer who was part of a small-time crime family who had thousands and thousands of dollars buried in coffee cans on his property, and had never set foot in a bank, so he couldn't get a loan anyway. So his daughter becomes I guess the villain in the Flower Girl murder, and the Detective Mark Allen, works for the Raleigh Police Department, and he kind of is onto her. There are a couple of murders. One of them, a woman named Daisy Burns, who turns out to be this woman's adopted mother. I feel like I'm not making any sense in telling you this story. This is not a very good elevator pitch. But anyway, so Mark Allen has to try and solve a couple of murders that involve this person who is kind of running a bit of a rampage around the Raleigh, North Carolina area.
You've received some wonderful 5-star reviews for your books, but of course I'm going to quote the ones from Murphy. Good old-fashioned entertainment. Get your copy and have a little crime-solving fun. Enjoy the characters. Fun read. Wanted to hang out and tag along with the Department of Redundancy. And I love the story. Humour, grammar and mystery. I can't wait to read another book by Keith Hirshland. And I'll add to that, nor can I. Also, the book is a full-on hoot. It is more than a funny and clever mystery. It's also a love letter to a quirky language in its goofiest form. This is some master wordsmith stuff. I'm impressed. Read this book. Lastly, where can Book Talk Radio Club listeners purchase Murphy in the Case of Serious Crisis, and of course your other books?
Well, at Amazon. They're all on Amazon, and also at Keith Hirshland, one word, KeithHirshland.com. That will link to Amazon, but my website, thankfully, and wonderfully designed by Claire Perkins, it will link to all the available places where you can buy it. And also my publisher, Beacon, BEACON, publishinggroup.com, has Cover Me Boys, I'm Going In, and Murphy in the Case of Serious Crisis. And a really cool thing about their website, if you link to their website and go on and try and buy the book through that, there is a link to a company called IndieBound, IndieBound, and you can buy the book through your favorite local bookstore, which I encourage everybody who's interested in buying the book to do, because that supports all the great local bookstores around the U.S. and I love to give a shout out to those folks because they're always so nice to me. But Amazon is, for internationally, Amazon's a great place to get it.
All right. All right, well, thank you, Keith. Once again, congratulations to you for winning Book Talk Radio Club's Book of the Year 2020. In the meantime, good luck for the future. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Book Talk Radio Club. Thank you, Keith.
Thanks, Claire. Always enjoy it.
My pleasure. Bye now.